Good morning, cross country team. This is our last video of the season. Hopefully, you guys have somewhat enjoyed these. I know it's been, for me, nice to make them as a way to communicate a little more information in I guess, a less rushed way than I would at practice. And the reason for that is, we've just had all these protocols this season of what we've needed to do to make things work. And one of them was splitting boys and girls into two separate groups, which we've never done before. It was just one of those things. It wasn't good or bad. It was just what we needed to do this season, a lot like masks and staying separate and just reducing a lot of the things that we normally would do. But it definitely made for end of practice, beginning of practice, a little more of a time juggle than it has been in the past. So thanks everybody for your patience with that, for watching these, for all of the items you took care of this year so that we could have an environment where sports could exist. When you look back on this season, my hope is that you find positives there, both with how you did as an individual, as well as what we were able to do as a group together. It was very rewarding, and for me as a coach, and I'll admit, going in to the season, I was a bit apprehensive about how it was all going to work. Would it come together okay? Would we be able to stay healthy? Not so much for you all or worrying about your actions, but just what it meant for society at large, for us to be able to make this even work. And you did, and you did all the things that we needed you to do, and much better than I thought any group of young people would handle it. And that's not a judgment at all. It's any group of people, I think, would have a hard time making such an adjustment in terms of the sport that they were used to. Now, you newer runners, you're not maybe used to some of the things we used to get to do that we didn't get to do this year. And my hope is you enjoyed the season, and that in seasons to come, we're able to add those items back in that kind of make cross country unique. But at the same time, there were a lot of positives to be found, and it was fun to watch everybody's improvement, watch everybody's growth, and really to see basically a normal season of athletic improvement. If on paper, looking back at this season, if I didn't know that we had contests limited, that they were chopped up into small groups of competing athletes, that we just had more restrictions than usual, I wouldn't be able to pick this season out. Other than the fact that I'm just going to remember that the fall of 2020 was like that. In terms of what we have left, because I think that is an important thing to start on, and it's brief. This week, we're on Tuesday. This is the only day we'll meet in person. This is the last week that the season can be in session. So this is the final week that teams can have practice, that you can get together. And the idea of the schedule was we would have had a state meet at the end of this week, but that's not going to occur. There is no state cross-country meet. So the section meets were the final races. So that means for us on Tuesday, we're just going to get together and collect uniforms. We're going to do that on the track. And I've asked for the track. I'm thinking football's on the field, if I remember right. And if anyone, boy or girl, varsity JV, wants to compete a particular race distance, we're happy to have you do a race. You can warm up, run a 200, 400, 8 mile. I think we capped it at 2 mile for George's sake, so he didn't put a half marathon in on the track. But you're welcome to do that, and I'll be there with a stopwatch, happy to time you. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. You don't have to. It's just up to you. And some people may have an unfinished item that they want to try for, and some people might be content with the way things went this season, and they're good to go. So there's no pressure either way on that. The one item that we need is varsity athletes. So there's 9 boys, 7 girls. So 16 uniforms are currently out. Those need to come in on Tuesday. So at a minimum, my expectation is at 3:30 on Tuesday, I see U16 on the track. So if you were at sections this past MEA weekend, that we would see you on the track, that you drop the uniform off, give a virtual high five, and at a minimum that. And then if you want to do something on the track that day, you're welcome to. We won't have anything else the remainder of the week, and then we'll have our banquet on Sunday. It's going to be on a Google Meet. I'm going to send out a link to you, to your folks, guardians, whoever that might be at home. And I would hope that we get everybody joined in. Normally this would be in person. Normally there'd be a meal with it. Normally it would probably take a lot longer. This is going to be a bit shorter. I've got it scheduled for 2 hours. I do not believe it's going to go 2 hours. Even with me rambling, I don't think we're going to hit 2 hours, just because there's a lot less moving parts to take care of in a non-physical setting, so in a virtual setting. There's just less to do. But that being said, I think it's important to have some closure on the season and to celebrate the things that you all achieved and to speak a little bit on each of your behalves. So that's going to be Sunday from 3:30 to 5:30. Again, probably end up being a little bit shorter than that. In terms of what was supposed to have happened this week, or what we normally would see happen, is we'd see a state tournament at the end of the week. And the way those teams get selected is it's the top 2 out of sections. And then once you remove those 14 runners from the top 2 teams, you take the next 8 boys and you take the next 8 girls. So there's 8 individuals as well as 2 teams. And I've watched pretty meticulously the numbers and how this plays out. This year's girls race was pretty normal. Again, in all honesty, looking back through the lens of history, this year's section looks virtually identical to every year's section. Typically on an average qualifier time, you would need to be in the 1930s to qualify as an individual girl to the state tournament. This year, the qualifier was a 1933. So the very last qualifier was a 1933, which means the race flowed pretty normally. Top 2 teams for the girls' side typically have to have all the runners below 20 minutes. And then the third team usually doesn't quite have all the runners below 20 minutes. Again, this year, pretty normal, pretty average. The times we ran as a team would typically put you right around the halfway point. So we had, our girls were kind of clustered between 20 and 21:30, actually about 20:30 and 21:30, about that 1 minute span. That's typically going to take middle of the section. So you're not going to be in the top tier, you're not going to be in the bottom tier. And we finished 8th out of 16 teams. It says 15 in the results, but South St. Paul chose not to race for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they weren't there. So they're not listed in the results, but there are 16 teams in the section. So that puts us on the very bottom of the top half and in a very normal year. And I thought our girls competed very well. And looking at how our new conference course times compared to the section, and again, the new conference course being the one we've run this year and last year, it looks as though they're about the same. Girls ran roughly the same as they ran out on the conference course, and then boys ran pretty much the same as they ran out on the conference course on average. Again, you may have one individual that shoots forward, you may have one that falls back, but on average, if you look at how we ran, how our other conference teams ran, the section course, while a different configuration, times seem to be about the same. So I think, knowing that if you didn't race and you look at our times and say, well, how would I have done on the section course? Probably you would have been pretty darn close to your conference time. And arguably with 5 additional days of training, your fitness needle wouldn't have moved a whole lot. On the boys' side, we saw a slightly slower than usual year. And I there are a number of reasons why that could be. I was expecting at least one, if not both, section races to be a little bit slower, just because of the new format. But girls, again, was pretty standard, pretty normal. Guys was slow, except for the top teams. The actual 2 top teams ran blazing fast. Incredible results. Prior Lake, quite honestly, is probably the number 1 team in the state, which we've never had that out of our section. The team depth in our section is pretty incredible. When you take Prior Lake and you say, okay, look at their top 7 guys. If Magnus, our number 1, was running on Prior Lake's team, he'd be 7 or arguably potentially 8th. So if Magnus is your alternate, you're doing pretty well as a team. If you're saying, hey, I got to decide who to bring, do I bring Magnus along with me to this race? I think arguably as a coach, you've got quite a set of cross-country runners that you're coaching. And we've seen the rise of Prior Lake over the last 2 years. It wasn't a surprise to see them on top. And Rosemount gave them a good run. They have a phenomenal coach, phenomenal team, two great teams. And Prior Lake Rosemount won or top 2 for boys. They were also top 2 for girls, which is the first time actually I can recall seeing that, where the same team took top 2 in both. Or same school took top 2 in both. So in terms of how we did there, normally for an individual standpoint, and it's been a long, long time since we've had a team go to state on the boys' side. On the girls' side, we had the 2016 group, and then before that, it was a very long time. So it's possible, and you can get there, but on the boys' side in particular, it's a pretty steep hill right now. Those teams are incredibly good. From an individual standpoint, usually it takes something in the 1640s. Somewhere in there, it tends to be where the cutoff is. Some years faster, some years slower, just like with the girls. There's no one number that's always going to get you in. It's the next 8 runners. And last year we saw a faster than usual year. This year was slower than usual. This year a 17:03 qualified. It's only the second time in my memory where a time over 17 has made it into the state tournament. Again, we're not having a state tournament, but if we were to, that's where the cutoff would be. So this year Magnus ran a 16:58. He would have qualified. So he would have made the state tournament. He made it last year as a sophomore. When we actually had it, he would have made it on the cutoff. So, I know he wasn't thrilled, Magnus. I know you weren't thrilled about the overall race result. But at the same time, I think it's important to step back and acknowledge everyone that day was going through the same set of challenges that we were. And everybody, when you compare to everybody else, I think you get a better sense of how we did as a boys team. We took 8th, which is really good. We edged out St. Thomas. They were missing their second runner again due to a school-related quarantine situation. Had he been there, we probably would have swapped places and been 9th. I don't think that's a stretch to say that would have been the case. But we finished 8th, so we finished top half. And this is the first time I think both teams have been in the top half for a few years. And that was my goal as a coach for our season from an output standpoint. My goal was that we would get both teams in the top half, and my goal is that both teams would win the conference championship. I can't control those things necessarily, but it's still a goal I hold, just like you may hold a PR or a time goal or a goal on where you want to finish, all conference, honorable mention type thing. I hold those goals as coach, and that was my goal for us, and we hit them both, which is awesome. In terms of where we go from here, we have a 5-month period of time before track begins, and I would urge you to consider joining track. If you're already part of the group and yep, I'm on board, awesome. If not, I would really encourage you to think about it. It's a great, number one, it's a great sport, and it's same group, more or less same group of runners, same coach, except I'm an assistant and Coach Lucio is our head coach along with Coach Sullivan. But we'd love to have you out. And in the between time, if you're not going to do anything else, run. So if you're not going to do any other sport, find time to run, find time each week. If you are going to do a sport, pick a varsity sport, varsity level, and commit yourself to it. If you don't want to do a varsity level commitment, then and you're not going to do anything in the winter from a sport perspective, just find time to run each week. And then join us for track. Or if you're not going to join us for track because you have something else going on, join another varsity level sport. I'm never going to tell you have to do that, but it promotes your growth as a runner. And then you look at the following summer, 9 or 10 weeks, depending on the year, where you have the log training. I'll talk more specifically about that as we get close, but my hope is that we can bump everybody up in training volume. I would love to see our Varsity 7 all above 300 miles in the summer. It's not a massive bar for 10 weeks. That's 30 miles a week, split 5 ways. You're talking 6 miles a day, under an hour a day of running. You already were doing that in season, and I would love to see us come into the season with the fitness that we have right now. And that's the bottom line. That's my hope, is that we would come into next fall season with the fitness you have right now. And then we can spend the season race sharpening, speed sharpening, adding mileage, all that good stuff that we can do when you come in really, really strong. And this year was so unlike every other year that I did not lean heavily on it. But I'm hoping that as we move forward that we can kind of push ourselves back towards that. My final closing item is going to be our Mad Dog this week. Our one last one goes to George. So congrats, George. I just thought you had a brilliant race to be able to be as aggressive and competitive as you were at the section race, and being such a young guy and such a young runner. You competed incredibly well this season. You should be really, really proud of how you contributed to the team. I do not believe we've ever had a 7th grade runner in the top 5 for the boys. Maybe not even the top 7, but not the top 5. And you earned that spot. You have fought really, really hard. You've had ups and downs, as any young runner will, but you kept bouncing back, and that strength you displayed at sections was phenomenal. So thank you for that. Thank you everyone for voting on the MVP, MIP, Rookie of the Year. So many of you voted, and that's a really big chunk of investing in a team. And hopefully we'll see you at the virtual banquet.